Sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader, esteemed colleagues. I rise today as chairperson of your Committee on Ways and Means to sponsor Senate Bill number 2437 as embodied in Committee Report 84, entitled An Act Adjusting the 13th Month Pay and Other Benefits Ceiling excluded from the computation of gross income for purposes of income taxation, amending for the purpose Section 32B, Chapter 6 of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended. Mr. President, this bill is a consolidation of 5 Senate bills with 3 bills: Senate Bill 256, Senate Bill 452, Senate Bill 1944, filed by no less than our Senate President pro tempore, Senator Ralph Recto, who also happens to be the longest-serving chairman of the committee which I now head, the Committee on Ways and Means, as well as Senate Bill number 1838, filed by Senator Lito Lapid, as well as Senate Bill number 2157, filed by this representation. In the House of Representatives, the counterpart measure is House Bill number 4970, authored by House Ways and Means Committee Chair Miro Kimbo and several other congressmen, which they have passed on third and final reading, Mr. President. Your Committee on Ways and Means conducted 3 public hearings in December 2013, in August and September 2014 to put the proposals on the table and thereby listen to the voice of various stakeholders from the government and private sectors. My distinguished colleagues, the issue confronting us lies on extreme ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, our fiscal managers are concerned about the potential revenue that our government is poised to forgo. As we all know, taxes can support development, enabling government to provide key services. This is the very basis of the social contract between government and its people. On the other hand, Mr. President, the state has the obligation towards its citizens to ensure that social justice is accorded to them, belated as it may be. May obligasyon po ang Estado sa ating mamamayan na tiyakin na nakakamit nila ang katarungang panlipunan. Mr. President, I am referring to the proposal to increase the tax-exempt threshold of the 13th month pay, Christmas bonus, and other benefits, which at present stands at 30,000. Sa ilalim ng kasalukuyang batas at polisiya, walang buwis na pinapataw sa lahat ng 13th month pay, Christmas bonus, productivity incentives, at iba pang benepisyo basta't hindi ito hihigit sa 30,000 pesos. Panukala po namin nila Senator Recto at Senator Lapid ay itaas ang ceiling na ito sa 75,000 para mas malaking kita ang maiuuwi ng ating mga kababayan para sa sarili nila at para sa kanilang mga mahal sa buhay. Noong 1994 pa kasi nailagay ang ceiling na ito sa 30,000. Buhat ng RA 7833. Hindi na po ito nararapat sa panahon, lalo na dahil sa inflation, iba na po ang halaga ng 30,000 pesos ngayon. As a little backgrounder, it was in 1994 through Republic Act 7833 that the total exclusion of 30,000 was legislated. In 1997, under the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program, the ceiling was retained at 30,000, but Congress authorized the Secretary of Finance to increase the ceiling upon the recommendation of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue after considering, among others, the effect on the same of the inflation rate at the end of the taxable year. Unfortunately, Mr. President, this recommendation from the Commissioner of Internal Revenue never came, and likewise, the move to increase the ceiling of the exemption never came as well. The ceiling was never adjusted despite the movements in the Consumer Price Index, the rise in the cost of living. The ceiling was never adjusted despite increases in the legislated minimum wage and basic salaries in both the private and public sectors. The ceiling was never adjusted despite the passage of 20 long years, although a law was passed some years back to increase personal exemptions for taxpayers and their dependents. It is noteworthy, Mr. President, that in 1994, when the ceiling was first legislated, the basic salary of a government employee in the lowest rung of government, or salary grade step 1, was 3,800 pesos, while that of the President of the Republic of the Philippines at salary grade 33 was 25,000 pesos. On the other hand, the daily minimum wage of a private sector worker in 1994 in the NCR, or National Capital Region, was 145 pesos a day, or approximately 3,100 pesos a month, based on 22 days a month. If we fast forward to present day 2014, Mr. President, based on the latest salary standardization schedule, a government employee in salary grade 1, step 1, receives a basic monthly salary of 9,000 pesos, a month, while the President of the Republic has 120,000 from previously 25,000. The minimum wage in NCR is now, the minimum daily wage in NCR is now 466 pesos from 145 in 1994, or roughly 10,000 pesos a month. In other words, even without being promoted, these salaried workers in government find themselves being taxed more because as their salaries rise, the tax-exempt ceiling for bonuses, 13th month pay, etc. has remained unchanged. As of January 1, 1995, the 13th month pay of all government officials and employees up to the rank of the President of the Republic was exempt because the ceiling was higher than their basic salaries. As of current date, Mr. President, the 13th month pay of an employee under salary grade 17, step 5 is already above the 30,000 peso ceiling. In our very own backyard, Mr. President, that is at the level of our Legislative Staff Officer 3 or LSO 3, a position which is often given to new graduates who are just applying, who have just applied to their jobs in senators' offices. Republic Act 8424, or the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program of 1997, gave the Secretary of Finance the authority to adjust the 30,000 peso ceiling upon the recommendation of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue based on the effect of the inflation rate at the end of the taxable year. But as I have said, Mr. President, this authority has never been used. But we must note that this authority has been used to adjust the value-added tax thresholds under BIR Revenue Regulations number 16-2011, effective on January 1, 2012, which increased the threshold amounts pursuant to sections 109P, Q, and V of the Tax Code of 1997 as amended. These adjustments, which were made by the Secretary of Finance, pertain to the sale or lease of real property, sale of house and lot, lease of residential dwellings, and sale of goods and services. This only means that the Secretary and the Commissioner could have increased the 30,000 ceiling if they had chosen to, as evidenced by their action with regard to the VAT or value-added tax thresholds. Mr. President, Article 11, Section 1 of the 1987 Constitution states that public office is a public trust. Public officers and employees must at all times be accountable to the people, serve them with utmost responsibility, integrity, loyalty, and efficiency, act with patriotism and justice, and lead modest lives. And let me add, Mr. President, this modest life is due in part to the take-home pay that has been reduced to the bare minimum because it has been eaten up by income taxes and the high cost of living. As one of our resource persons at the committee level termed it, this is the take-home pay that cannot take the employee home. Your committee is not deaf to the fiscal needs of government. It also recognizes that over the course of 20 years, when the 30,000 peso ceiling was not increased, we did legislate measures that ensured our workers have bigger paychecks, such as increasing the personal and additional exemptions, as mentioned earlier, as well as the exemption of minimum wage earners from income tax. But then, Mr. President, what we are asking today is simply to put the 30,000 ceiling to its present value. Per the Consumer Price or CPI Index data from the National Statistics Office, or the PSA now, Philippines Statistic Administration, the 30,000 peso ceiling is worth approximately 82,000 pesos as of August 2014, with 1994 as the reckoning period for this increase in value. Mr. President, my esteemed colleagues, your committee is simply asking that we adjust the ceiling to what was intended by Congress in the 1990s. Over 2 decades ago, or 2 decades ago. In fact, this bill only asks for an adjustment up to 75,000 pesos. And since the Secretary of Finance has not exercised the power delegated to him by Congress, we propose in this bill that the authority to raise the ceiling in succeeding years shall be vested in the President of the Republic, and that the adjustment be made mandatorily every 3 years to coincide with the major surveys conducted by the Philippine Statistics Administration, such as the Family and Income Expenditure Survey, FIS or FICE, which is done every 3 years. The Department of Finance computes the revenue loss at 43 billion, or 39 billion rather, using 2011 data that it could not substantiate at the last hearing conducted by the committee. On the other hand, the UP School of Economics puts the figure between 1.6 billion and 5.6 billion. This is the revenue loss, Mr. President. Another expert has put the figure at 2.97 billion. Mr. President, social justice implies fairness and mutual obligation in our free society. The workers toil in order to live. The government taxes the fruits of their labor in order to provide basic services for the workers and their family. Nakasaad po sa ating saligang batas na dapat pag-ukulan ng Kongreso na pinakamataas na priority pagsasabatas ng mga hakbangin na mga ngalaga sa mamamayang Pilipino at palalawigin ang katarungang panlipunan o social justice at karapatang pantao o human rights. Kasama na po dito ang isang living wage o sahod na sapat ikabuhay. What the government loses on the one hand, it could recoup on the other hand through consumption taxes and taxes on investment. But today, Mr. President, the workers cry out for social justice and the living wage. Pakinggan po natin sila. Maraming pong salamat, distinguished colleagues. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senator Ralph Recto, as I said, the longest-serving chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, also, who is an author of 3 bills which were consolidated into this measure, also wishes to deliver his sponsorship remarks.
Thank you, Senator Angara. Senator Ralph Recto is recognized to deliver a